So since so many people are at home on quarantine, I thought I would take advantage of this golden opportunity to do the first in a series of videos that I'm going to do all about the drama of the knitting wars. Now, I know that the whole concept of the knitting wars is a new thing for so many of you. You didn't know the knitting wars were going on, much less that they take place in a larger online knitting community. But trust me, it's even crazier than I have led you to believe in my articles. It is absolute insanity. So I'm going to do my very best to try to put as many of the pieces of the puzzle together as I can. I want to make very clear that I'm not the first person to try to document this stuff. Quillette has a series of articles on it. We're actually going to be using those series of articles. We also have Unsafe Space. Go to unsafespace.com. They have a wonderful YouTube channel that has documented a lot of the knitting wars, and they were the people that really taught me what the SJW ideology is and how to identify it and how it shows up in culture and all this good stuff. They're a wonderful resource of information, so I cannot recommend them highly enough. And then, of course, there's all the knitters in the community. Listen, I feel like a little bit of a fraud doing these videos simply because I was not involved at the beginning. I wasn't involved up until about halfway through it. And so I just want to ask the knitters in the community, if I miss something, if I get something wrong, if you want me to do a video on a thing that I haven't covered yet, please leave a comment, let me know. I do feel like a little bit of a fraudster being the one to do these videos, but I think anyone can create videos, and I would also welcome other people documenting it. But I think that it's maybe just important for me, or maybe important for my own entertainment, really, to be able to have some fun with this situation that has caused me a lot of stress and people I know a lot of stress. To be able to put these together, I think it's almost going to be like a closure moment. So that's part of why I'm doing it. All right, we are going to get started, though, with what I believe was the first major incident, shall we just call it. And Katherine Jepson Moore has done a great job. She did a series of articles for Quillette that we're going to be using as part of this. So let's dig right into it, shall we? A witch hunt on Instagram, published on February 17th, 2019. Knitting is just so white. Let's hope it gets better. I overheard this puzzling remark in my local yarn store in Edinburgh, Scotland last week. The store is in an affluent area of Marchmont, just outside of the city centre. Its Edwardian and Victorian tenement flat adjacent to huge green spaces are popular with students and families alike. Two customers were chatting to the store owner. "It's about time we had the conversation," one of them offered. Her companion nodded in solemn agreement. Listen, side note here. I don't know how many of you on Instagram have been following me when I do dramatic readings so basically a dramatic reading is when someone sends me SJW stuff that they've seen posted in the knitting community, or alternatively, I might see it myself. I'm not seeing it as much these days just because I'm much busier than I was then, but someone might send me something and then I do a dramatic reading of it with extra flair and drama just to really, really emphasize how absurd it all is. And I tell you that because I can't promise that during certain points of this article, I might not fall into dramatic reading voice. I promise not to read the whole thing in dramatic reading voice, though. Knitting, which helps lower the blood pressure and keep the mind busy, has enjoyed an upsurge in popularity in recent years. The internet has allowed for the proliferation of new platforms for which to buy yarn in patterns and has helped artisans and hobbyists connect worldwide. Usually it's a calming and creative pastime focused on aesthetics rather than politics. Dare to dream. However, a short browse through the knitting posts on Instagram steered me in the direction of the source of the exchange that I had overheard and the conversation it had produced. On January 7th, Karen Templar, knitting designer and owner of the online store Fringe Association, published an innocuous blog post on her website entitled 2019, the Year of Color, in which she enthused about her forthcoming trip to India. To most observers, Templar's post read like a guileless account of her hopes and aspirations for her upcoming travels. So listen, what I want to do at this point is I just want to pause. She's going to quote from the post, but I actually want to go and read the post. And first I want to talk about who Karen Templar is, because this is actually important for context. Karen Templar owns Fringe Supply Company. Now, they may not look like much to you, but in the knitting world, Fringe bags are like the Louis Vuitton of bags. These are the bags that everyone wants. They're more expensive than most knitting bags. They have special editions. Everyone wants a special edition. They're really, really nice. I don't have one yet. I'm sure I'll get one at some point. But they are really nice bags. And I think that that's important to point out because they didn't just go after some random rando. Like, they didn't go after me, who was just like posting my knitting on Instagram with like a couple hundred followers or whatever at the time. They went after someone that is very high profile in the knitting world. Again, I really believe this was like the first major incident, and they didn't choose a nobody. They chose a somebody. And that's a pattern that we've seen over and over and over again. They're not just going after like random people. They're going after people who have followings. They're going after people who have something to lose, and they're threatening their businesses, they're threatening their livelihoods, they're trying to destroy their partnerships, destroy everything these people have spent years and years and years building. It's just absolutely disgusting. But I thought we would just like take a quick look at the blog post that we're talking about, and it's still up. You can still go find it right now. I would encourage you to do so. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I just want you to know, look, she's even got her apology up here at the very top. We're going to talk about that apology in a second. But essentially, so this blog post basically starts off saying, you know, my husband and I, we realized we were getting older, and we realized we hadn't seen the world, and we wanted to see the world, but we didn't have any money, and so we moved to Nashville, which was much cheaper to live in than San Francisco, so that we could have extra money to travel. And then they talked about how, you know, well, she says it here. Maybe we'll just read this. People who know us would likely describe us as gutsy and adventuresome. We've been all up and down the West Coast hiking backcountry trails and climbing rock walls and whatnot. You've both seen most of the US, but when it comes to international travel, I guess we just didn't know how to say yes to that. It seems so daunting, so foreign. And it might have been 20 years ago, but now with debit cards and iPhones, there's not a lot of difference between traveling to Paris, Texas and Paris, France, functionally speaking, except we didn't know that because we were too nervous to try, or too busy, or recovering from surgery, or, you know. It was so much easier to just keep not going until one day we decided we didn't want to find ourselves old or infirm and wishing we'd gone while we could. So we decided we would go to Paris. Keep it simple, just one city. And I kind of knew the language. And if we only ever made it to one place, hey, at least we'd seen Paris. We still thought we didn't know how, but we decided we just picked some dates and bought some tickets. We'd be forced to figure it out. So that's what we did. And in April 2017, we went to Paris. Other than the cost and the length of the flights and the fact that some people didn't understand us and vice versa, it was just like traveling to any other big city we'd ever been in. It was pretty thrilling and emboldening, and we walked everywhere, took a cab twice, and never left the city. And I kind of knew the language. Everywhere else still seemed sort of daunting, but we loved it, and we made a pact that if we would leave the country at least once a year for as long as we're able, which we half did in 2018. When I got the chance to tag along to Portugal last June, it wound up being at the expense of Bob leaving the country. We almost went back to Paris for my big birthday last month, but we decided on dessert with loved ones instead. If you ever have a chance to travel with friends who are really good at it, or this is why people do group tours, I now understand, you should do that. Again, what I learned is it's not that hard or difficult or different in this day and age. And although the flights can be more expensive than domestic travel, it can be cheaper overall. My elaborate trip to Portugal was a bargain compared to our few days in SF in September, but at this time I was with people who simply rented cars and plugged an address into Google Maps just like home, and off we went all over the country. What I got to experience there, as I mentioned last time, left me so hungry for more. I wanted to see the world, and more importantly, I want to be a person who says yes more. So far, this is a long way of telling you, I plan to wear more color. This year's resolution, wear color, be color, live in color. And listen, I'm reading to you the most important parts of this post because what I want you to see is that Karen was very excited about what she was doing. Like this was almost like a new beginning. Like she had always been so scared to travel internationally, and now all of a sudden she was. And she wrote about it in a lovely blog post. I mean, isn't she an amazing writer? She's really very good. And, you know, you're going to see how this all worked out, but I want you to really understand that this was a joyous moment. This is like, oh my God, world, I'm here. Let me go. I'm going to go see everything I want to see, and I'm not going to let the fear of anything hold me back. And that's beautiful. And that's what they can't stand. That's what the SJWs can't stand. But let's keep going. So I'm just gonna skip over some of this stuff. This is kind of saying the same thing. So let's scroll down a little bit. I had fun getting dressed when I was in my teens and 20s and even 30s. I was more playful with color and shape, easier because, as we've well established, I was constantly refilling and reinventing my closet. Ever since committing to making more of my own clothes, and thus wanting the effort to pay off, and to try to be more mindful of what I'm putting in my closet, I've been playing it safe. Partly it's because I moved across the country with so little, and had to reestablish those basic building blocks of a functioning closet. All the more important in a small closet with slow turnover. Are you still with me? Here's what all that travel stuff had to do with this. I'm going to India this year. I've wanted to go to India for as long as I can remember. I've had a lifelong obsession with the literature and history of the continent. Photos of India fill me with longing like no other place. One of my closest friends from that pink striped tube skirt era we originally met at JCPenney is Indian, and her family had offered me back then that if I ever wanted to go with them on one of their trips, I could. To a suburban Midwestern teenager with a severe anxiety disorder, this felt like being offered a seat on a flight to Mars. It was fun to think about, but are you kidding me? I was so young and dumb then that I didn't even partake of my mother's Indian cooking. Talk about regrets. In recent years, my wish to go there had intensified, and then there came a point where I just decided it wasn't meant to be. Bob has no interest. It's not like I'm going to go by myself, so when? How? I'd have to be content with books and movies, and it was a sad way to think that way. It was sad to think that way. Then about 6 weeks ago, the opportunity presented itself, a chance to go with a friend who's Ben. I talked it over with Bob, and we agreed I should do it. I took a hard gulp and pushed a button. I said yes. I felt like the top of my head was flying off. I was so indescribably excited. Within 48 hours, 3 of those friends of mine who were much better travelers than me, but who are all equally humble at the idea of actually going to India, also said yes. There has hardly been a single day since that I haven't said in disbelief in my head or out loud, I'm going to India. Do you see anything wrong with this yet? Do you see anything wrong? So basically the blog post ends, she talks a little bit more about her excitement, and then it ends, so once I realized that, I punched her in we're not going to talk about that. I've booked a trip to India. I put our house in order, figuratively speaking, still working on the actual piles, and in 2019, you'll see me wearing pink pants. So she booked her trip to India. She was excited. She posted this blog post on the internet. Now, if you know anything about SJWs, you can probably already see where this starts to go horribly wrong. So if we go back to Katharine Jepson Moore's article, we've got the quote from it about her finally making the decision to go to India and being so excited about that. And listen, again, I just want you to really think about a time in your life when you've just been so over the moon excited about something you never thought you would do, and you finally get the courage and the guts to do it. And now watch what happens. And what on earth could be wrong with any of that? Rather a lot, it turns out. After a series of encouraging posts from well-wishers, the comment thread took an aggressively inquisitorial turn. You guys know what word I'm trying to use. Templar's previous posts had garnered between 3 and 30 comments, but my year of color has 197 at the time of writing. One of the first people to attack Templar was a user named Alex J. Klein, who wrote, Karen, I'd ask you to reread what you wrote and think about how your words feed into a colonial, imperialist mindset towards India and other non-Western countries. Multiple times you compare the idea of India to the idea of going to another planet. How do you think a person from India would feel to hear that? Templar politely explained that Mars and India both felt unattainable to her as a child, but this comparison did not strike her as imperialist, but she promised to give the matter some thought. I have had responses from several Indian friends and readers today, she said, who had nothing but positive and encouraging responses. I'll have to see if anything I said offended them. Now, listen, what's happening here is Karen is trying to be logical. Now, if you have never engaged in a conversation with SJWs, don't do that. Don't. It's not, no, just don't. I know it seems like the right thing to do, but you're not going to get anywhere. I promise you, you are not going to get anywhere. They do not want logic. They want you to bend the knee to what they want. That is all they want. That is it. And we're going to see that with the response. Evidently unimpressed, Klein retorted, instead of asking your Indian friends to perform more emotional labor for you and assuage your white woman's tears, maybe do some reflection on how your equation of India with an alien world reinforces an other mindset that is at the core of imperialism and colonialism. So we've had bad cop come in there, right? We've had Alex J. Klein, who's being a little aggressive, and now we're going to see good cop show up because they all coordinate this stuff. They're all talking, anytime they do this, they're talking behind the scenes and messages and stories and message boards and all this crap. Like, they're all coordinating this. So we're going to see good cop show up now. I want to say this gently, a comment from a user identified only as Sarah Began, because I can tell your intent is to share your personal evolution and celebrate facing your fear of the unknown, and that's great. But I just need to point out that there's a lot of othering happening in this post. She went on to explain that your posts upset some of my friends who aren't white and who didn't grow up in America, and advised Templar to engage in a little more reflection before you equate India with Mars. They're lying. They always lie. They always lie. They always make this up. And then you ask them for the receipts. You ask them, okay, show me, because listen, here's the thing. These people screenshot everything. They take screenshots of literally everything. And so if you ask them for receipts and they say, oh, I can't possibly provide that, well, BS, man, then it didn't happen because you screenshot everything else. Because they use the screenshots, they post them in their stories, they use them to direct people to attack people. That's probably another thing I'll get into. But yeah, they screenshot absolutely everything. So if they can't provide proof, then do not believe a word they say ever, 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 ever. They're liars. In an omniscience development, previously supportive commenters now began to turn against Templar. Marie Carter, who had originally written, "You're even more inspiring than I thought," seemed to have a change of mind 3 days later and returned to correct herself. So she's been corrected, she's been educated by the SJW. She went to the gulag, she came out, it took 3 days, she was re-educated, and now she's back to educate Karen. I have read through the entire post again, and I am ashamed to say that I failed to consider the impact of this post on all of us non-white people. So what she's saying there is like, I wasn't offended the first time you read it because no one told me I should be offended, but now I'm told that I should be offended, so I'm coming back to express my offense. I skipped over the offensive parts because this space is so important to my well-being. But my heart hurts, and I won't be able to live with myself unless I acknowledge the pain to me and others like me of the words used. I am no longer going to say nothing. Same here, replied Liz N., a biracial POC, a day later. Person of color is what that means. Just in case, listen, I know like some of you have asked me in some of my videos what these terms mean. SJW, social justice warrior. If you see POC, POC, that's person of color. If you see BIPOC, black, indigenous person of color, it's, SJW bingo. Okay, on and on it went. Templar patiently fielded these criticisms as best she could, but her inquisitors were not satisfied. They will never be satisfied. They will literally never be satisfied. And we're going to see Karen made the wrong choice. She apologized. But if you end up in a situation like this, Do not apologize ever. Don't do it. It will never, ever, 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 ever be good enough. I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not apologize if you find yourself in this situation. It is really disappointing, announced Joey, to see your defensive and dismissive responses to the 2 thoughtful posts that point out some of the problematic aspects of your writing. As white person to, as I think it should be one, as one white person to another white person, we need to take feedback with respect and integrity. Instead of your year of color being about wearing bright colors, why don't you make 2019 investing in contributing to people of color, buying their art, listening to their podcasts, following them, contributing money to them, buying literature written by people of color. Comments like this set off a wave of critical voices across knitting communities on sites like Ravelry.com, one of the biggest source of online knitting patterns by independent designers from around the world and the home of many knitting chat forums. We're going to address Ravelry a little bit later. Ravelry was kind of the thing that thrust the knitting spotlight into the spotlight like on the knitting community, because it was about, 5-6 months after this, they banned all talk and all support of Donald Trump on their platform. So we're going to get to Ravelry in a sec, but we don't get there first because we got to let this whole story unfold. That happened later. Most of the criticism amounted to sharing written words by knitting activists, and I'm not even going to dignify these people, who posted educational content on their profiles for others to circulate. Instagram notes scorned Templar's peak whiteness and reminded her that the world doesn't owe you a patient explanation and education, and that as a colonizer, she ought to stay in her lane. I don't know how to pronounce her name, also warned her white knitter friends that if they stayed silent and didn't speak up against racism, then they would be considered part of the problem. Okay, I'm going to say this again. This person also warned her white knitter friends that if they didn't speak up, they would be considered part of the problem. One of the things that's happened is that staying silent in the knitting community was not enough. In fact, they've gone after people who just chose not to say anything. If people just remained silent, if they didn't speak up and show support for this crazy ideology, then they would get attacked, their businesses would get attacked, they'd try to destroy their partnerships, they'd do the exact same thing. So just staying silent is not enough. You had to bend the knee to these people, otherwise they made it very clear that you were going to suffer the same fate. For anyone unfamiliar with the jargon of contemporary anti-racism, the criticism of Templar reflects the movement's more general critique of Western society. Overt racism, which anyone would agree is abhorrent, is not their main focus. Rather, they are preoccupied with identifying subtle, implicit, and often unconscious manifestations of bias, which, by their nature, are almost impossible to refute. In this fraught climate, writers may be shamed as racists, irrespective of their good intentions, which are held to be irrelevant. Jonathan Haidt, the American social psychologist, observed during a recent conversation with Joe Rogan, "It doesn't matter what the intent was. All that matters is the impact, how the person felt. When confronted with accusations of bigotry, white people are expected to confess their primordial sins and repent by acknowledging their racial privilege and to resolve to do better. Only then may they be granted absolution by the anti-racist clergy." An outrage spread across Instagram's knitting community. Templar published a new post on her blog entitled Words Matter. We're going to look at that in a sec, in which she prostrated herself before her critics and asked for their forgiveness. And so we're going to read that in a second. This article goes on and talks about Maria Tuskin. I'm not going to get into Maria Tuskin's case in this video. We're focusing on Karen Templar, but she's coming up next. Thank God Maria is back in the knitting world. She's come back from what happened to her. It's very, very exciting. I'm thrilled that she seems to have really regained herself, but we'll talk more about that in the next video. So listen, what I want to do now is just look at some of the follow-up to this. So we can actually go. The first thing Karen did on January 8th was to post a comment saying that she'd offended people. So she says, "To everyone I offended by what I've written here, I want to say I hear you and I am sorry. I have read your comments and thinking about everything you have said. I will be thinking about what's been said in response for a long time to come. As I don't believe in editing the historical record and in support of transparency, I am leaving the original post as it is with a link to this at the top. Now, so she's issued, I think this was like her first apology. Let's look at the date. Yeah, so she issued this Words Matter apology a couple days later. So this was apology number 1. In the sane world, this might be all that it would take, right? You say something wrong, people call you out, you apologize. This is not how SJWs work. Never, ever, ever apologize ever. Because look at what Rachel says. You're sorry, people were offended. This is not an apology for your deeply racist and reductive statement. Please rethink this trip. Don't force the people of India to deal with you and your colonizing mindset. Ugh, crazy, crazy, crazy. And listen, you can go and look at these comments. Go read these comments because they are insanity run amok. They are so crazy. And like I said, like they start out really nice. People like, oh, I'm excited for you. This is great. And then at some point, it just goes all downhill. But let's go over here. And again, really, I mean, if you want to see the true insanity of this, oh my God, these people are crazy. But let's go over here. So that original apology wasn't good enough. So Karen had to issue a more thought out, in-depth apology. And this is what it is. So let's read second apology, as it were. Words Matter on January 12th. I have hurt, angered, and disappointed a lot of people this week with my insensitive blog post about my upcoming trip to India and my handling of the response, and I am deeply sorry about it. I spent the week listening hard, learning, in part, how much more I have to learn, and thinking of all the things I can do, particularly here on the blog, to be more inclusive and supportive of people of color. I can't take any of this week back, but I will work hard to do better going forward. For those who didn't see the offending post, it's important to spell out for everyone to see and think about and hopefully learn from. So here's where she has to confess her sins to the world. First, it sounds like I'm a tourist looking for an exotic location for my next selfie, which is inherently horrible. India is not a set or a backdrop for white people. It reads that way because I didn't take the time to talk about why I'm going, which is to meet textile artisans and learn about their craft. I'm coming to India from a place of respect for the relevance of textiles in the country's liberation from British rule. Because someone can't just go to buy pretty things and to enjoy themselves. They have to come from a place of deep reverence and respect for the colonialization that has happened in this poor country. Second, and more egregiously, when I said that to my anxiety-ridden teenage self, the offer of travel to India felt like the offer of travel to Mars, I gave the impression that I equate the people of India with aliens, literally alienizing people who aren't like me. I'm sorry, like pause. Did I miss the fact that aliens were discovered on Mars? There's nothing on Mars. There's nothing. There's like little cells that might have some life in them, maybe. But there are not aliens on Mars. There are not. So you aren't equating people in India to aliens on Mars, because aliens on Mars don't exist. I mean, for Christ, these people are insane. It doesn't matter that that's not how I intended it. I dispute that, but I always think intent matters. By being careless with my words, I perpetuated the harmful notion that Indians and people of color in general are other and even to be feared. People who are the target of racism every day were rightly offended by it, as were others, and I am so sorry. Third, I compounded the Mars problem by bringing it up again to say that my grown-up self might even consider space travel if I got the chance. Because God forbid someone, if they got the chance, would consider going into space. I don't even know if these people hear themselves. It's absolutely insane. By referencing an interview I had heard about the impending colonization of Mars. I brought up colonization in a piece about a country marred by colonization and didn't see it. Anyone who was shocked at that was right to be, and I am shocked at myself. No, you shouldn't be shocked at yourself. You're a human being. You wrote a beautiful article that was expressing your excitement about going to this place that you'd wanted to visit since you were a kid and didn't have the nerve to. I completely understand that. Listen, I have not traveled a lot internationally. I was supposed to go to China in November. Like, who knows if that's gonna happen now. But like, I completely understand the nerves from that. I'm still scared to travel internationally. And so to overcome that is a big deal. And these people have just, what I hate most about this is that these people have squashed this innocent, like, childlike behavior of someone who had almost like reclaimed a second part of their life, but realizing they were getting old and they wanted to see the world and they did something about it. And it's this beautiful childlike innocence that these people have just come in and squashed under their boot. It's absolutely insane. That's not comprehensive, but it's the main thrust of it. It took women of color pointing this out to see it, which is not their responsibility, and I am thankful to them for taking the time. If you're struggling to understand the response, please just sit with it and give it some serious thought from their point of view. I apologize profusely to everyone I hurt and everyone who has taken any kind of heat for calling me out on it. I was wrong, and the women who took the risk to speak out were right. I'll be doing the work and sharing the resources and doing my part to raise the visibility and celebrate the actual beautiful diversity of this community. And she's noting here she's currently reading The Origin of Others by Toni Morrison. These people, I'll tell you what. Listen, if you want to go to India, go to India. If you want to be excited about going to India, be excited about going to India. You can be excited for any reason that you want. You never have to justify yourself to other people. You certainly don't have to justify yourself to people who are doing nothing other than getting off on controlling you. If this can happen in the knitting community, this can happen anywhere. It can happen anywhere. We've seen it happen other places. If it happens to you, you might not think you have a chance at it, but God knows, I bet a lot of the people that this has happened to in knitting didn't think they would either. Do not apologize. Stand your ground. Go watch Unsafe Space. I'm telling you, Unsafe Space will be like the best YouTube channel that has ever happened to you. It will give you your power back. It will help you understand what's going on when these things happen. And it might terrify you a little bit because some of this stuff is really scary. But at least it puts you in a position to be able to defend yourself when they inevitably come for you. Because they just might.